Today I am very thrilled to introduce to my audience a man who has spent his lifetime exploring all aspects of tattooing, and he's a tattoo artist, and his name is Pablo Mascia, and he's based in South Australia at Aldinga Beach, and he's just recently written a book about all aspects of tattooing. Now, when you think about tattoos, people often just focus, Pablo says, on the art form itself. But when you really go into it in proper detail, tattooing is incredibly complex. There's so many aspects to tattooing that are necessary to be considered before you have a tattoo. You've got things like the actual ink that's being used, the color. For example, titanium dioxide can affect melanin, which can affect sleep and different things like that. You've got things like symbology, and this is going to put a frequency or vibration into your energetic field. You've got the location of the tattoo, of where it goes on the body, highly impacting your energy. You know, we're energetic systems. We're made of energy. So it's incredibly important to consider so many things. There's also the way people handle pain, and there are 3 types of pain that Pablo's going to talk about. So I think this is such an important topic, Pablo, because although I'm not a tattooed person myself, I will transparently admit I don't have any, and I've never been guided to have any myself. I know so many people now are having tattoos, particularly, you know, young people, but, you know, all people. It's really a thing at the moment. My friend was talking about how a lot of the tattoos now she sees are anime, like from Japan, you know, those sort of cartoon-like tattoos. And I think that it can be very much a fad thing too, that people get onto, and they don't realize what implications it's having in their energy and spiritually on them. So the title today is The Essential and Ignored Link Between Spirituality, Energy, and Tattooing. I'm thrilled to welcome Pablo, who's such an expert in this field, and I love to explore the spiritual aspect of this. Pablo has shared that he's not feeling 100% today because he has some vertigo, which is actually a ascension symptom. And the ascension symptoms are ramping up because we are currently receiving the highest level of ascension energy that we can possibly integrate without, you know, it just being impossible to manage. So the incredibly high levels of encodings and DNA activations at the moment, and vertigo is one of the many, many symptoms. So how are you going with that, Pablo, today?
To be honest, getting out of bed just felt like I was in an old school gravitron at the show, the Royal Show, you know, spinning around. Oh.
Right,
But
right.
I've come to learn later in life that when we have pressing engagements such as this, obstacles get in the way, and it's there to kind of like test us to go, oh, you know, I'll just cancel it and be whatever. But then you don't get that opportunity, or you know, for growth or to network with someone. Like, it denies you things that you know is good for you, you know, like this is good
Absolutely.
because I get to meet
Absolutely.
someone like yourself, and whatever comes of it is great. But like, there was a part of me at the start was like, I can't do this, I want to cancel. And I've just noticed in different points of my life where those things happen, I've always thanked myself for just pushing and persevering through that, because there was always something there that was like sabotaging it, you know.
Oh, that's such a great point. I think a lot of people are feeling that at the moment, you know, because it is so intense energetically. But when you push through that, it's like you overcome an obstacle, and it's like a spiritual test often. Yep, I totally hear you. And
Like
so
familiarity, right?
say
You
that
know,
again.
it's like a familiarity. You go to what you know best as your default, right? So the
Yes,
trick is to go against that and be okay with the unknown and the uncertain and the
that's a great point.
chaos.
Yeah, totally. So I would say, just as a few ideas for vertigo at the moment, if it's any way helpful, that it's very
Sure.
important to ground your energy as much as you can. Put your feet on the earth. Ask the earth to take away some of that. You put your back to a tree and ask the tree to work with you energetically to help heal and balance your energy and center your energy. Also, visualizing roots going from your feet into the earth, and a grounding cord wrapping around the core of the fifth dimensional crystalline earth. Different grounding essential oils for grounding, and having foods that ground you. Some people like meat when they're feeling ungrounded because it really grounds the energy. So there's different ways that you can try to, and also being mindful of centering your energy and just sort of stabilizing and centering your energetic field, coming 100% into the present moment. I'm 100% right here, right now. If you visualize a timeline in your solar plexus, in the center of the timeline, bringing your energy into the center instead of being in the past or in the future. And that's a really good way of also helping. So there's many different techniques like that that you can work with. So I hope that that's helpful in some way. But anyway,
no, I took a few of those boxes, hence why I was able, I didn't cancel on you, to be honest, and they're just mentioned. So, great minds think alike.
Yes, absolutely. And, the red essential oil is a really good one for the grounding as well. So I know you love the Young Living essential oils. So that's the one. Perfect.
Maybe two already.
Well, we're very much on the same page. So I really love to hear all your knowledge about so many aspects of tattooing, and we can only explore so much in one interview. But when you release your book, I definitely want to have you back on to tell people about your book and to, further explore this topic, because it's such a big area at the moment. And what is happening at the moment is that the energy of being tattooed is being inverted for sort of the darker purposes. And we really want to explore that, because maybe many people are unaware of this and need to know this information. So I'd like you to take the floor, Pablo, and just share away whatever you'd like to share on this topic. And I'm looking forward to hearing all your expertise.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure. Thank you, most importantly, for the opportunity. As we mentioned off air, I'm not really socially active on internet and social media, I should say. And the reason why, I guess, it's been that way, considering I'm in an industry where all we do is post, and people think that, well, there's this illusion, I guess you could say, that we need to post every tattoo that we're doing all day to generate business and income and stuff. And there's some truth to that, yes. But I guess when I've been tattooing for about 22 years, but about 16 years in particular in my career, I decided to turn away from the industry. I didn't like the path it was going, and did something that was considered to be.
Sorry for interrupting, but there's a finger going over the camera, and I don't know.
Oh, it's a fly.
A fly. Oh.
We are near the beach.
Fascinating. Talking about a fly sabotaging the interview.
Okay. Well,
Naughty fly. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
That's fine. I just thought, I wanted to branch away, do something that was considered unnatural, because it was always considered there's a stigma behind home tattooing, for example. It's always dirty and unhygienic, and things can happen. And if anything, I would be the model for that, because I used to work with the health department for many years. I had good rapport. I don't have a criminal record, all these different things. I can work with children and all that sort of stuff. And if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be me. And I didn't want to use any of my boss's connections. He was a part of a big manufacturing business, let's say, and people were sort of amping it up, and it was getting quite popular on the internet. So I just wanted to make a thing of like, well, if I'm going to break away from this, I want to break away from everything I was tied to. And I've made it almost a vow to not rely on social media. So for 2 years, I abstained from a single post and just continued with my basic principles, which is the word of mouth, the good experience, and obviously being passionate about what you do. That would get me through. Turns out by the end of that 2-year period, I was far busier than I ever was in all the 16 years working for other people.
Wow.
In many different ways. And through that time, I started to recover from all the PTSD of growing up in the industry. I started when I was 17. There was a lot of trauma growing up in bike clubs and stuff like that. Just so you kind of know a little bit of back history. to where I've come from. Like I didn't just wake up in this situation I'm in now. So yeah, I went down that darkness. I was lost as a 17-year-old. And then coming back, you know, once I was on my own and reliving that stuff and processing all the trauma and stuff, which is a very real thing in our industry. But that's a side topic. So yeah, I managed to process all these different things. And as I found that, I found each time I would like tick a box of like completing a cycle or releasing a trauma, something would take its place. And it incrementally got more and more prevalent that my energy body was starting to come alive a bit more. I was already starting to dabble into like crystals and things prior to the move, but specifically when I started working on my own, and this is what I was talking to you before about offline, how until you live and breathe this craft, you truly don't know what the craft does because you're just thinking of it as a business exchange from 11 till 5 or 11 till whenever. We're not really 9 to 5 people, but you don't really know what goes on about the portals that open up and all these different things, which we can go into later. And that sort of prompted me to explore Reiki and do these different things. So then I started getting into becoming a practitioner. Then I found out I'm basically doing Reiki anyway, because the moment you're putting hands on the client, you're interacting with their energy fields and you're essentially tapping into people anyway. I write about it into the book anyway. Like the Reiki just gives you the ability to attune to that frequency, but we still have that natural ability to tap into people. We sometimes, as practitioners, will focus on the heartbeat. We'll know when to draw a line at the precise moment when they're still. We're not just if they're breathing frantically and the heart rate is going everywhere. We're not just going to draw a straight line over that because of the fear of that will move and will create like a wobble. So we learn to tune into that body over time. We're so well in tune with that person. We're with them for the whole journey, every breath, every heartbeat. It's amazing unconscious behavior that we adopt.
It's sort of like a ritual, isn't it? Where you're working with someone together, and it's like quite in some ways a sacred experience of unifying your energies together in that moment to come up with something that is going to be what the client wants.
Yeah, and in a very for the most skeptical minded person, which is the people that I try to aim for, because let's face it, spirituality, there's a lot of pseudo spirituality involved. There's lots of people throwing different terminologies that I don't truly understand, and I always feel like science has its place to some degree. There's aspects of science that complement metaphysics, and them two together just give it this backbone behind it all. So I'm really focusing on like that point of view. So to say you're tapping into someone, you could look at it physically and just, as we just talked about, their heartbeat, their breath. You're with them, when they're in pain, when they're relaxed, and you're tapping into them in that way. But then there's the other spectrum where you're into their aura. You can tap into their chakras. You can tap into spirit. You ask soul's permission a lot of the time doing things, and you can get into that clairvoyant aspect simultaneous to the physical, which is the point I'm trying to make today, is about how tattooing is essentially an intermediary modality that combines that between the spiritual and the physical realm, which I think is very, how do I say it? Like it's not very well established. Like it's not very well talked about because it's purely art form. And what I'm trying to say is, yeah, the art form is to a degree very important, but not at the expense of all the things that are happening to the body and to the spirit. Because I think as a consequence of focusing on art, there's a void of everything else.
Absolutely. And then you've got this for the rest of your life, essentially. And it's incredibly profound, the impact that it can have on your energetic field on so many levels. So this is something people don't realize, when they have tattoos. And so perhaps we'll start with your introduction as well, Pablo, with your information that you wanted to share about perhaps the inverted aspect of what can happen with tattooing if you're not fully aware of, what's going on.
Yeah, so I might just do like a brief little intro, and then we can just turn it around and see what questions come from that, yeah?
Sure.
Okay, well, let's... So I'll put some pictures up and then I'll sort of narrate some things over the top for you.
Fantastic.
So let's go here. So for example, what we're looking at here, is essentially pigments. Now, these pigments are naturally sourced, so they're from different herbs. And tattooers back in the day would use just simple remedies, certain alcohols, and note that there's clearing herbs and stuff here too. Things for pain. Actually, they're for the tattooist, but they're all different things to help with the ceremony itself. And when we're talking ceremony, we're talking this sort of stuff. This is not what you'd say a conventional tattoo experience, nonetheless, but this is also how it used to be back in the day. And I'm not saying you have to tattoo in this particular way, but note some of the things that they're doing, the space that's around them. You know, they've essentially got a circle. You know, it's like a doorway, it's a gateway. It's also to protect them, the physical body, and to channel things from the spiritual body. You've got homage to like candles. You've got homage to spirit. There's different things. The man here is accepting the pain. He's receiving the tattoo in a particular way, like he would receive medicine from a shaman. And this is where I sort of raised the point. Tattooists were essentially shamans. Let me rephrase that. Shamans were the first tattooists, I truly believe, because they integrate the spirituality in a way that, you know, we're well accustomed to, but then also the craftsmanship. They're the godfather of tattooing as we know it today, because the first ever stone was actually a crystal. It was a flint crystal, believe it or not, over 20,000 years old, dated actually, was first used for incision into the skin. Then later down the track, and we learned this actually from this guy, 5,600-year-old remains. He was dated 5,600 years. He was found about 1996, I believe, in the Alps, the Swiss-Italian Alps. His name's he's referred to as Otti. He is the oldest preserved tattooed human specimen in the world thus far. Wow. Predates everything we've ever known about humans' relationship to tattooing. So, you know, this doesn't document all of his tattoos by far. I mean, he's had over 60, well, it's a bit of debates between 58, 62 tattoos, but over 80% of them, like these ones, they're not fancy pictures or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but what makes them very specifically interesting is they reside over acupuncture points of the body.
Wow.
So when they actually did some physiological tests of him, I'll go back to maybe this one. And the reason why he was found in this position is because it was crushed by a glacier. So that's why his arms all crushed the way that he is. Right. Maybe this one would be a bit better. Oh, where is it? Oh, sorry. Now I'm just pressing stuff. Yeah, this one. So yeah, essentially what we learned from him is not only he's one of the oldest preserved human specimens ever found. We found that his large list of tattoos actually reside over acupuncture points that are still used today in traditional medicine. And the third part of it, which no one talks about, is who tattooed Otzi, because a lot of his tattoos, as you could see in this reference here, the one in the middle section here, that was on his lumbar. How would he tattoo himself?
Yes.
You know,
yes.
Who tattooed him is probably the point. And what was another interesting point to make, and I'm doing a bit of a botched job of trying to explain it, but I do it better in my book, obviously. He actually was found with tattooing equipment on him. He was found with a flint crystal, found with bone. And the tattoos, unlike other tattooed specimens found, still to this date, the ink pigment itself is way darker and richer than what you would expect to find in a mummy, which means and suggests that he had multiple sittings on the same site. So when you learn about his physical ailments that he died from, he had like stomach issues, rheumatoid arthritis in the knees and spine and stuff like that. So the tattoos were placed in particular areas were actually on acupuncture points to help address those, to remedy those ailments. But then obviously they weren't done just once, they were done over the course of a lifetime. So he actually had equipment and a means to reapply over time.
That is so fascinating, because it shows that there's a level of advancement there that is not even considered today in, many of the cultures like Western culture, people don't consider putting their tattoos over acupuncture points today. And so that is so interesting. Wow.
We're doing it unconsciously, right? So that's the
Yes.
point, because I'm trying to make it conscious. And I'm trying to make this disclaimer that I'm not like trying to reinvent, to take credit for anything like that. I'm simply just like rediscovering this stuff and trying to modernize it, really, to make it applicable today.
Yeah.
And when you understand also the skill, let's go back to this skill of using a flint crystal, right, to sharpen a particular way, to prepare the pigment in a particular way, as we just shown, and then to diagnose the person's ailment, and then to place specifically these markings on those areas to treat in accordance, done in an era in the 5600, the Neolithic era, which was basically around the time Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine and Vedic medicine were starting to come into our literature in the history. Excuse me. Tattooing was around the same time as this.
Did they know? I've got a question. Did they know how old this man was when he died?
Oh, I couldn't tell you exactly. He was probably he was an older gentleman, let's just say that. But I don't know. I can't off the top of my head know exactly how old he was.
Yep.
But he was he essentially, his death. He was a traveler, right? So he did have like a spear injury in the back of his on his shoulder. They believe that was attributed to his death.
Yes.
But through the course of his life, he acquired these tattoos in particular ways. So going back to the point of the craftsmanship involved in making the skill, in making the tool itself, administering it, and knowing exactly how to handle skin, the depth that is required, so there's no scarification and the ink doesn't fall out. And in accordance with applying it in a particular meridian for the intention of its healing, and then to teach that information to the patient to then self-administer later on, blows my mind.
Well, it confirms that, so much of our history is a lie, and that there were civilizations before us that were way ahead of where we are now. So, that is great confirmation of all the lies that have been told to us.
That's right.
And fascinating.
And you can also see too, he addresses some of the spiritual stuff. So anything that's on the wrists and ankles are deemed to be like boundary conditions or protective forces, amulets, if you will, against the invasion of evil spirits. So the whole premise of like acupuncture, for example, is wind is considered the devil. So any type of wind, cold, dampness, things like that invade the body, you actually want to do your best to avoid that because it invites disease. So for example, back in the day, they'd note that pallbearers, for example, would have to be tattooed very quickly after the session presided, because they would be the first to typically become victims of the spirit. So they have to get their wrists and their ankles tattooed in a way to avoid the invasion of these entities into the body. So yeah, just trying to paint like a brief. I could go right into it, a lot of detail to go through. I'm just trying to pick certain points that are relevant to the task at hand. So just forgive me if I'm sort of like cutting back and forth a little bit. It's just such a fascinating topic in itself. Like you could really go down a rabbit hole with this.
Yes. Yes.
So I guess now, going back to ritual itself. Now, you're honoring spirit, you're honoring the body, you are honoring those who come before you. Ancestral ties, roots, generations that came before us is so prevalent and so important in the craft itself, because even though you can't see them, the spirits of the person being tattooed as well as the tattooist all reside around the space. So this is why you have to honor and create the circle and invite the spirits in whilst you're doing this. So this can be done in a modern way, but just, because you're in the conventional setup where, you're in an open environment, there's music playing, you've got everybody with iPads and telephones and things like that. These days, it's very hard to honor these things. So I guess the premise I'm trying to make is like, if you connect with these type of things, don't sell yourself short by going into a tattooing environment or go seeking a tattooist that doesn't honor the same things as you do.
Yeah, yeah. And when you think about it, most Indigenous cultures did have tattoos, didn't they?
Well, that's right. They had them for many different reasons. We refer to it as a rite of passage in many different ways. Although I don't necessarily agree with that terminology to some extent, but there is a degree of truth in the matter that it was a rite of passage. And that is a very broad term. It can be used for many different things. But I truly believe there was a spiritual power and a wisdom behind it that they were using it for, which is why there was a rather ambiguous relationship with religion during the colonizing era, where they tried to sort of take away tattooing. So all the islanders and stuff like that were under threat of losing their sacred practice by colonization.
Mm.
But that's a whole other chapter in our history. They can go down a rabbit hole in.
Yeah.
But I guess what it does prove, into some degree, is if the religion construct itself was trying to demonize it in such a way, what are they so scared of? Is the
Yes,
question
exactly,
I
because
say.
there is a lot of power in this as well that
Well,
can
that's right. And
maybe
they
be
didn't understand,
utilized for the positive. Yeah, yeah,
and you fear what you don't understand, and then you want to control that. So this is what
yes,
religion does to some
yes,
degree.
absolutely, absolutely. I just did a whole post on religion versus spirituality in my community post. It was a brilliant piece that I copied from an unknown source, and fascinating. I'll put it in the notes underneath the interview.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's important work. So,
Very cool.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
okay, so we sort of touched briefly on, I guess you'd say, for the greater good and its sort of its true intended nature, as I
yep.
like to say, as being a therapeutic practice. You're looking at the influence on the meridians, on the organ health. You're taking into account the spiritual practice when you're taking care of the appropriate pigments, which is a conversation we'll have a bit later. The chemicals involved in today's era versus the organic herbal based stuff of yesteryear,
Yeah,
and the spiritual impacts it has on either with either on the body.
yeah,
Um, and then obviously the practitioner themselves, are they Reiki practitioners? Do they align with the spirituality? Are they what allegiance do they follow? Is the other question too. So
yeah,
this leads on to the next bit,
yeah.
which is to show, I guess, the inverted aspect of this. Now, I'm not saying or portraying these people as evil, but what I'm suggesting is their practice is the polar opposite of what I'm just trying to explain to you.
Sure.
And I think it's interesting
Cool.
how it's become glamorized, and it's almost nowadays, because this is old stuff.
Hey,
It's
can we
not.
go into your video there, Pablo, while you're talking? Just
Yes,
so I can
yes,
see you. Sorry.
yes. Thanks for reminding me.
No worries. Yes, it becomes glamorized, and then people lose sight that it can be hijacked for negative purposes.
That's right. So I'm just going to share just a little clip, and then we can talk about it after.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, viewing discretion is advised. Stop there. It can go way more gruesome.
Okay, so we were talking here about the inversion of what happens with tattoos so that it becomes something that works in a negative way with your energetic field.
Well, I guess you could talk about that video as well, where it highlights the opposite of the presentation I gave before with the old ways. Um, it's in a black room. Everyone's in black. You are experiencing, for people that don't know much about this particular community or group, they actually don't charge money, or at least at that time. So people travel all around the world to get the artwork done by them, which, let's be real, it's just a pain ritual, and they're facilitating barbaric, almost the bloodletting Babylonian ritual esque
Yes.
qualities to the.
So it's all inducing trauma, triggering trauma, creating trauma,
well,
that sort of thing.
that's right. And like the guy says before he goes in there, every time he doesn't know why, but it makes him feel that little bit more complete. And you collect tattoos how you see yourself. So that's when he looks in the mirror, that's how he views himself. This void of all color and just black, even to the detail in the eye. He's trying to change himself. And this is that ideology where people that follow the Luciferian or the inverted energy aspects believe that they are their own God. He's not happy with how God created him, and he's therefore trying to convert himself or transform himself, through his own vanity.
And you can make the same analogy with people that go and have cosmetic surgery to, make their lips bigger or to get bigger boobs or whatever they do, because they're not happy with the way that they were made. Or even you can even put that into terminology with the LGBT movement, because God made you a certain gender or sex, but you don't feel comfortable with that and you want to be the other one. And it's like you could put it into that as well, which is very interesting, because Dolores Cannon actually said that. She said that people can incarnate as one sex because they want to experience something that is a bit foreign to them and not familiar with them, but their natural inclination is to be the other sex. And so they naturally try to go back to that one because they're finding it hard to adopt this new energy, but they're having that new energy experience so they can complete themselves and have balance. But anyway, that's a whole topic, but it's an interesting analogy with what you're saying.
Yeah, and when you think about the occultic and the esoteric black magic philosophy, it's all about combining the two genders together as one. That's why Baphomet was both male and female together. They're merging everything into one entity, which is the transgender community. So people who follow or succumb to this, whether in support of it or not, it's that dualic game that we almost abstain from, because if you truly follow the light, the true light, which is God, not Lucifer's light, which is of many, is the master of deception, you realize that there is no polaric differences. It's one, it's united, it's whole.
Yes.
Whereas the opposite of that creates the left wing, the right wing, the good, the bad, the black, the white, and everything. And that's what the trans thing is becoming. It's a symptom of that as well. So people that fall into that unknowingly are falling into the trap in that regard. So yeah, that's a whole nother.
It is a rabbit hole.
but it stays on the topic of the inversion. So this is what we're becoming so familiarized with. So that video that we just saw, that group, that entity, that's not very new. It's been around for at least 10 years. That's a very old clip. But we see that very common now. I mean, I've just finished a project doing a full blackout sleeve on someone as well that wanted that stuff. Now, he has granted different reasons for that. The reason why people come to see me is, because I would say not only it's just my artwork, but it's how I carry about my craft and my passion, what I pledge my allegiances to, whether they're aware of it or not. But his intention was for his own sort of transformation in some regard. So I didn't use the conventional materials or chemicals that we would use. I used some prototype stuff, let's say, to help with the spiritual transition of things and whatnot. And I always put in the context, if it's not me, then he's just going to be fed to someone else that doesn't care about him and is going to not only inject him with these different things, but then there's that sort of reconditioning, or that, what's the word I'm trying to say? Like when you believe you have an issue, say self-worth issues. I'll put in this context. So people come in, this goes into what we're talking about with the pain aspect of tattooing, and what the three different modes, the pain, avoidant, presence, and punishment rituals say about people, is when they go in seeking punishment, where the tattooist is there to confirm to them that, yes, you do deserve it in a spoken way.
And it's sort of what it's doing, it's reinforcing that pain sort of programming, so that it becomes, as you continue these things, they magnify it, so it becomes more extreme each time, and then they can potentially go towards self-harm or something like that if they're unconscious about it. Yeah.
You leave them on the street because once they leave the tattoo chair, they're off to fend for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Incapable of completing their trauma cycle. Many more unresolved issues have come up that have not been addressed, and you just left them on the curb to deal with it all. And then that reinforcement, as you said, which, you know, if they don't seek help, like a lot of people that are walking around undiagnosed and having a lot of psycho and analytical issues, you know, they adorning tattoos that should be kept in their therapy journals as opposed to like putting it on their body.
On their body. Because what it does then is they're maintaining that energy within their field, so they're not able to sort of heal it and overcome it and move on because it's permanently tattooed on their body. So it holds them in that space and doesn't allow for them to be able to sort of evolve, I guess.
Yeah, and tattoos serve as emotional anchors as well. That's why we get them for motivational stuff, not just for trauma-related stuff, but things to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. An emotional quote or a word, or you know, whatever it may be. It's there to serve, and it can be either way. We can perceive it as a negative thing or a positive thing. Interesting enough, over an entire lifetime, like one image, one word. Every time we read the same poem or see the same movie or listen to the same song, does it not change over the years, you know, our feelings towards it or the meanings that we might have?
Yeah, totally.
You know, so tattoos are definitely an anchoring of those predispositions, I guess you could say.
Definitely. So share with us the because you talk about understanding the important tattoo formula. So one of the aspects of the formula is the chemical component of the tattoos, and you were talking about how with, for example, the white ink, it has titanium dioxide, which can affect the melanin levels in your body. So I'm sure that each color has intricate aspects to it that are impacting the body in different ways. So can you share like an overview of that chemical component of the tattoos?
Well, yeah, ink should always be thought of as more chemistry equations when you're looking at it in a physical matter, but then also the light frequency aspect of it in the metaphysical aspect. So they both work hand in hand different ways, and they affect different things. But to anyone that's truly understands the spiritual realm, they'll know that anything that happens in the natural realm will also impact the spiritual realm and vice versa. So they two work hand in hand. So you've also got to take into account that titanium dioxide, as you mentioned, and many of these chemicals that are made in tattoo inks, there's a bit of a stigma about them and stuff. And yeah, they've gotten better over the years with different processes. But you know, the industry is so poorly regulated. It's only just made an industry audit where they've tried to ban a list of substances like additives to the ink, the pigment.
Does it also depend on the countries? You know, you get it from, like, for example, China, you know, if you're getting it from China.
Well, that's right. But any professional knows not to source from eBay or, you know, China in particular. But, you know, there's reputable places, you know, for me in particular, my experience ever since I first started, you know, there's two main brands that I've always used. I've never deferred from them and have always produced laboratory results and things like that satisfy, you know, my mind to some degree. But I know it's only the lesser evil. There is no true manufacturer of pigments that specifically for tattooing, meaning most of the pigments are from the same factories that produce carbon black, for example, in photocopy inks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so there's really a niche there for spiritual people to create with intention, you know, inks for tattooing that of a really high frequency vibration. For example, you talk about Young Living oil, because I have some Young Living oil. It's called Feelings, and they're different types of Young Living oils that you can get to work with different feelings, the feeling bodies, the emotional body, and they're very high frequency. So, you know, do you include those with your tattooing? I think you mentioned, and also things like Aquan, which is Ian Welsh has this product which is really high Christ consciousness energy. water and liquid, putting a few drops of that in with it, things like that could really impact as well.
Yes. Well, okay, so let's go down this topic. So I think unless you're able to, and I'm experimenting with at the moment with specific herbs, the charcoal of that, because when I first started the industry, basically we learned how to make our own tattoo inks, needles, machines, and stuff like that. So 20 something years on now, I'm starting to get back into that. And it's a dead art, let's say. But I think there's so much tremendous value and to gain from that, for the collector in particular. But that's many years away of development of stuff. But point being is there's a route there that you can explore, and I welcome anyone to try and go down that route. That would be amazing. So what we can do, the lesser evils, let's say, the lesser evil, even if it's pharmaceutical grade pigment, it's still not, even though they're way more expensive, harder to come by, it's still not 100%. I don't think anything truly is when you're injecting into the body if it's not herbal based, essentially.
Yeah.
So what you can do to remedy that and offset that sort of stuff is, change the frequency of it. So I've experimented. I do with my bloodletting ritual stuff. Now, bloodletting ritual is essentially the act of removing the energy specifically from a tattoo without going through the trauma and problems that can occur from laser tattoo removal. So it's helping to change the energy, how people feel about a tattoo, that they just have to surrender and accept, instead of this thing of constantly trying to change and alter, like we were saying before, plastic surgery, changing, altering your face, and the extreme of the guy in the video. What's underneath all of that is just the energy and how you feel. So there's specific essential oil formulations that I'd make and basically release that through the vortexes that are opened up in the wound. So if you know anything about acupuncture, the vortex is there. That's what you're trying to open up. And the more holes that you are, the bigger the vortexes are, the more release that can come out of trapped energy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you can use like a rife machine or anything that's got some sort of Tesla coil type-esque contraption, and you put the ink in the middle of that and then run your sweeps of frequencies, whether it's a particular frequency. For example, I did Schumann frequency for a period there. There's a number of different Schumann frequencies, but obviously you can start at 7.83. Then you can go, the solfeggio one, so 548, 728, all those different ones. You could do the marriage of those different ones. I've even gone to the extreme of like the primary color set and then the primary chakra frequencies, and that way you're doing all of that. So I've done many different experiments to see what happens with that. I'm trying to figure out what's like an overall, what's the word, cleanser, I guess, of the inorganic compounds in the ink. I'm still yet to find exactly what works. Obviously, when you're dealing with this stuff, it's very hard to find proof of it actually working.
Can you measure it in terms of some biochemical thing in the body, like the blood or something like
muscle
that?
testing is the only real, and
Yeah.
anything kinesiology tells you is about muscle testing and dowsing, so you can understand what's beneficial, what's not beneficial, and your body will tell you essentially. So I'm a big believer in that. I implore that a lot. In my practice. For example, if someone wants to choose their color palette, I always say you have to choose your colors. It's like choosing your song or your notes in your symphony. So say, for example, something comes up, we choose the color purple. Well, I'm going to give you a series of different purples and you'll muscle test to pick the exact tone of purple that you need.
Oh, fantastic. That's a great idea.
So it's things like that.
Wow.
Help remedy.
I love that. So I think I'd like to finish with the topic of, we've covered, a little bit about the location of the body and acupuncture points and things, but what about the symbology of what people are choosing in terms of the artwork? How important is the symbology for people when they're choosing tattoos?
Well, it's very important to be aware of the symbology that you're pledging your allegiances to. As I said, what impacts the physical also impacts the spiritual. So when we're talking about symbology, we're talking about an unspoken language, and it has ties to particular primordial energies that predate many esoteric literatures and things of that nature. So you have to do your most what's the word? Man, my brain's just gone.
The
You have
most
to
sort of
be so
comprehensive research. Is that what you
yes. You have to put in the work because there's so much misinformation and come from so many different sources that even if you think this is the trap some people fall into, even if they think it means one thing, later on down the track, they'll hear it from someone or YouTube clip or something down the track which suggests something completely different. And then
Yeah.
they go, oh, what have I done?
Well, a
And
classic one would be that you talked about the pentagram of as a Freemason symbol, something like that. You don't really want to go there.
well, yeah, and to correct you on that, I mean, it does have ties to that to some degree, but it is a all standing. All right, so this is a classic example of why symbology is important, right? I use the pentagram. So the pentagram, for example, is a benevolent symbol. It is a magical symbol, and it is used for mainly two purposes: to banish or to invoke energy. Now, when people typically get the pentagram, it's associated with witchcraft, and witchcraft in particular can be known as black magic too. So they tend to, and satanic, it's adopted by other Luciferian principles which invert the energy, which is typical. But say in the context of just getting a simple 5-pointer star upright, if it is not done in the particular way that it is supposed to, it can actually have dire consequences on your energetic field. And what I mean by that is when you ask anyone with a pentagram, oh, was it invoking or banishing one? What quarters were channeled through in that as well? What the hell are you talking about, quarters? Well, each point is about the quarters, the north, south, east, west, an element of fire, earth, water, air. So you need to understand what quarters are being, what's the intention, essentially, behind the symbol. And if you don't follow suit with that and just get any old thing, leave it up to the tattoos because, quote unquote, they know better, you're not going to get the desired outcome. Now, I only know about this stuff because early in my career, actual full practicing white witch came in and wanted a pentagram, and she told me everything I needed to know before I did it. And I was so thankful for that because it contradicts from a tattooist point of view, as I was saying to you last time. Uh, when you're putting an image, if I'm right-handed, typically the tattoo, I have to go from right side to left side so I don't smudge the stencil. But that counteracts the intention of how it needs to be written. So I have to forget that, let that go, and find a new way to do exactly what the objective is to achieve. So symbolism is a huge thing because you can walk around inviting energies that you don't necessarily want or are aware of as a consequence of bad or misinformation, essentially. So that's one thing that plays to everything. All Egyptian ankhs, even the huge thing with the spiritual community with the sacred geometry. If you can imagine, sacred geometry is essentially a vibration, right? They all are different expressions of vibration, which then you could also, with that analogy, then think them as different languages. So you've got French, Spanish, German, whatever. And then you're seeing this juxtaposition being laid upon people's arms for decorative purposes. They call it wallpaper, that they're doing with these hybrid things because no one just wants this simple thing. It doesn't look artistic enough. So you're getting these big spreads over arms and backs of just different cut and paste Photoshop stuff. But to anyone who understands the vibration and its fundamental reason for being there to begin with, they'd see it as a question, a sentence beginning in one language and ending in another. It would just be such a confusion. Be like, what? It's German, Japanese. The vibrations all mixed up and chopped up, and it just makes no sense, vibrationally speaking. So, yeah, what might look good artistically actually is horrible and horrendous, energetically speaking. It's like playing a wrong chord on piano or something like that, listening to that for the sound of the rest of your days.
Wow.
It is what I'm referring to. So that's what you need to understand is, yeah, you've got the physical aspect, but what's the energetic, the spiritual thing doing? Would you want to hear that same on a piano for the rest of your days if you were able to? No, you wouldn't. You'd want to make sure it was concise and exactly what was intended.
And in harmony with your energy and something that supports your, positive potential. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why I always say, particularly of sacred geometry, it should always be aligned in with your astrology charts, your numerology. That's what defines the sequence or the shapes of the geometry to be tattooed.
Right.
Then, in conjunction with that, for further confirmation, your muscle testing.
Mm.
Your body will tell you, do I want to receive this tattoo or not? And I can help prove that with my investigations where I've looked at the aura fields prior to the stencil even being on. So you see the state of their chakras and their aura colors and all things that are going on prior. Once the stencil is on their body, then we test them again to see a completely different set of readings, which would indicate that they're not ready to receive that. So there needs to be an adjustment phase. We go back and make the adjustments, what might be, come back, and then that will confirm to us again in the readings if that was the right thing or not. And then before the tattooing, we do the muscle testing, make sure it's what they want. And if all those things align, we do it.
Oh, it's so important to consider all this when you're getting a tattoo. It's a far cry from someone just randomly on a whim going in and grabbing a tattoo of this girlfriend that they've just met, and they get matching tattoos on their arm or something.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
it's
rushing roulette, you know.
yeah,
The
yeah.
only reason why I know this so well, so intimately, and I'm so passionate about this stuff is because when I first started my career, there was only 2 studios in South Australia that were doing cover-ups mainly in the tattoo industry. And essentially, from day one, stories of just people coming in. My first tattoos were a majority of the time reworking old stuff because I was thinking, well, it's already bad. I mean, how much more worse can it get? So I'd rather practice on that. That gave me a bit more security when I was actually ready to do fresh stuff.
Right.
Because I couldn't make it any more worse, right? But then you hear the horror stories behind that and the reasons why. And I'll tell you the truth, man. Some of the reasons why people regret their tattoos go beyond the scope of what you and I will talk about. But
Mm.
some of them would be satanic abuse, ritual abuse, the practitioners being wolves in sheep's clothing and actually invoking spells and curses upon them and having ill effects as a result. You've got people that, would go into binding rituals. They use magic to bind love spells and stuff like that. And then
Yeah.
things like that don't work out, and then they come back wanting, literally, I remember this couple, they did magic with each other and it didn't work out, come back threefold on one person, the other person was the victim. She wanted a name that she got done a week prior, done in flames, and the other one came back a week later to do something else. And you see all these different, I'm not trying to sensationalize it, but these are just experiences that I've had that I've always thought, oh, this is a bit, you know,
Yeah.
something to always put in the back of my head. So understanding what goes wrong in the tattoo ritual, as I call it, is communication is probably first and foremost. Misinformation, doing your proper research is very important. Understanding symbology, knowing what's on your body, where it is on your body, what that says about you and your state of health, how you handle the pain and what that says about you, what can be brought to the surface to help you realize some lingering psychological states that you're in that maybe you haven't fully worked on that and it's come to surface and you need to address that. We all have these nagging residual things that, well, man, I thought I worked on that years ago. And then it just pops to surface, just a little nib, just to kind of give you a little gentle reminder that there's still a little bit more work that needs to be done. That comes up, and then the takeaways that come with that sort of thing. So in the context of all those different things, I'm sure I've missed, color's the other one, knowing the sounds to use in your symphony, so to speak. All these things basically suggest the right way to, I guess, encode and imprint upon your physical vessel, which will encode into your spiritual vessel. And that will remain with you for the test of time, even in the afterlife,
Yeah,
So,
totally. It's a cellular soul memory, isn't it? So it
well,
can
that's right.
on your record, on your records.
Yeah. And then there's the genetic stuff too. Then I've also seen tattoos that work as walkie-talkies when it transcends death. So there are people that are able to use tattoos to communicate with past loved ones.
Oh, wow.
So there's all different types of things there, particularly when a tattoo's passed away and some of the collectors are a bit switched onto them and the relationships they had, which is the evidence of the cords that come with the practice. So that's another thing that we probably talk about another time is the cords that happen when you're being tattooed by a practitioner, which is why it's very important to understand the tattooist to a higher and more intimate degree than what I guess is accepted in the conventional system. You're just looking at their Instagram, what they tattoo and what music they like and, superficial stuff. But like, you got to really tap in and ask the the real questions about the person. You know,
Yes.
who do you
Yes.
follow? Who do you pledge allegiance to?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because there are a lot of pseudo spiritualists out there that are talking about Reiki tattoos and doing things with intention and stuff like that. And to my experience, they're not anything of it. They're just using it for marketing gains.
Absolutely. Well, wow, you've opened up a whole positive can of worms about what we need to look at
Yeah.
and think about when it comes to tattoos. I think it's brilliant because it's
All
so
this will be
important.
addressed in the book. You know, sorry to cut you off, but
Yes.
as I said, there's so much to cover, but all this is addressed in the book. So like we can always talk about dribs and drabs as things come along. I'm happy to share like topic by topic because there is so much. And
Yeah.
it's because no one talks about it because we're so obsessed and so concerned with the art.
And it's interesting, I will say too, that people always seem to have names that suit what they're meant to do as their sole purpose and their sole mission. And when I thought of your name, Pablo, I thought, Pablo Picasso, that's perfect. You're an
Uh,
artist. Isn't that funny how that happens? But it was so wonderful to chat with you. When is your book due to be released, Pablo?
well, it's in the publisher's hands as we speak. So
Right.
hopefully mid to late this year would be great.
Fantastic. Well,
Oh,
we'll keep in contact and we'll definitely do some more chats. And I'll also definitely have an interview with you when your book's released. I love what you're bringing to people's consciousness here. And I hope that lots of people who are listening, if you know anyone that's getting tattoos or wants to get a tattoo or someone wants to learn about tattoos, please share this interview because it's really important knowledge. Thank you. All your details will be below as well, Pablo. And for people that want to contact you as well personally. And I look forward to following this further in the future. Thank you so much for your time. And
thank
you know what happened to the
you.
time? Because it flew. Like we've been chatting for ages. And
Ah,
it's like, yeah, what happened to the time? So that was weird in itself.
and thank you for your patience. As I said, I've got a bit of a situation, so thank you for informing me about the vertigo and what's going on with that. And you know, thank you for the opportunity. As I said, I relish any opportunity I get to talk about what I'm most passionate about. Because it's got, in the end of the day, it's got nothing to do with me. Pablo's just the vessel, but like the message and the things that I've learned, like that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm most passionate about.
Yes.
And anyone that shares a similar interest, I just want to find my tribe. You know, so hit me up. You know, I want to talk. I want to learn. I want to share. You know.
Oh, that's brilliant, Pablo. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone out there that's been watching. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.